Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 36th episode of By the Drip. This podcast is all about coffee, entrepreneurship, and the inspiring people we meet through the world of coffee. And today, we're excited to welcome Paul Ross, founder of Special Guests Coffee in London. Paul's a true trailblazer in the specialty coffee industry, with a career spanning barista championships, opening a world-class coffee shop, and helping train and coach 3 champions in the coffee and good spirits. In this episode, Paul shares his journey in the competition scene, the inspiration behind Special Guests, and how he's making competition-level coffee accessible to everyone. We also take a dive into what it takes to open a cafe built around hospitality and his insights on balancing life, travel, and entrepreneurship. So please enjoy our conversation with Paul Ross.
All right, people, welcome back. This is episode number 36 of By the Drip. We are joined today with a very special guest. I've been waiting to say that little hook. Paul Ross of Special Guests Coffee out of London, England. Is that correct? You're out of London, England?
Yeah, that's where I am right now.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. I nailed it. Paul, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. The weather's getting colder here. Coming into Christmas now, so things are not your usual. They're ramped up a bit, but yeah, all good.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for being here. We know you're a busy guy. You're a jack of all trades. You've got all sorts of projects on the go all the time. We're going to unpack some of those today through the conversation. But Paul, we'd love to start with what should be a very simple question, an easy start. How did you get into coffee, Paul?
Yeah, so it was never. Well, I started drinking coffee when I was 21, which is quite unique, maybe. And it came about because I was at university. I was going down this academic route of business and economics and things like that. And what happened was we had an entrepreneur come down and give us a talk at the university, and it sounded like a great business, and it was local to university. So I asked him for a job, and it was in coffee, and he ran a coffee roastery in the town that I went to university. And so backwards and forwards, he eventually gave me sort of a summer job for a couple of days a week. And to paraphrase the whole story, he was like, you need to go to the London School of Coffee to learn about coffee if you're going to do this job. And so I did, and I enjoyed it. I always enjoyed food and drinks, and, you start to dial in coffees and analyze them and talk about them. And that was that until I finished my studies. And then from there, I kind of was looking around thinking, like, what am I going to do next? Like lots of people, especially out of university, being like, okay, I need to get a job. And I started working part-time at a coffee shop because I remember this thing I did. And then I was like, I like that. So that happened. And then I discovered the world of competitions a couple of months afterwards. And then, as they say, the rest was history. I participated in the internal competition, then in the nationals, and then didn't do as well as I wanted to do in the nationals. And then year after year, essentially built my way up through the competition scene, moved to London because I was living just outside of London, moved to London, and then, worked at various cafes, met various people, competed in various competitions. I think in 2017, I won my first competition after maybe 3 or 4 years of trying. It was the Coffee and Good Spirits for the UK. And then from there, I was working an array of cafes in London. Then I became, one of my friends approached me, and he was going to join a new roastery and was like, we need someone to start the wholesale or work on be the first wholesale person. And so I did that. Then from there, I became the head of product at another coffee place, which had more stores. And then from there, I was like, it's time, I've been to the nationals, I've been to the world and had access to these incredible coffees. And for the most part, they didn't make it to the UK, and or they were just in competition. So there were specific lots just for competition. And I thought that was a shame. And especially over the lockdown period where I was the national barista champion going into that. So I had a title for 2 years pretty much. But we were then swapping coffees online and things like this, and had access to incredible coffees. And then I wanted to be able to share them, but it was a time where no one could share anything pretty much. And so it just showed me that these higher end coffees, or these interesting coffees that we saw at competition, were wanted, or there was a demand for them. And so then a few years later, it transpired into Special Guests, which is now 2.5 years old. And it's a business that I began that specialized in higher end, more unique, interesting, bespoke lots of coffee that you wouldn't see everywhere else. So yeah, that's to paraphrase it quickly.
Shit, yeah, love it.
And then, funny enough, like all of my friends who are sort of on the same career path through school and university have now, like, they work for the government, or they're accountants, or have what I would say more traditional jobs. And then there's me, the person who works in coffee, which I'm sure lots of people can understand.
Paul, what was the first year you got into coffee? Was that 2014, 15?
I think it was like 12 years ago. So like 2012. And then it probably had a bit of a break. And then, yeah, maybe 10, 11 years ago was when I had my barista job. Yeah, I think it was 11 years ago.
And do you reflect back on that time and how different coffee was then versus it is now? Or
not so much, because I think the whole industry is in flux, right? Like, it's always like there's bits and pieces, and it in some ways it's very different. In other ways, it's not different at all. Like, I'm a strong believer in hospitality, and even through, like, the economic and financial and all these other turbulences we have, that these macro influences we have, that hospitality will never fade out. Like, people crave human interaction, and this is why I love cafes. I often say my favorite thing to do at the cafe is be on till and chat to people. And everyone's like, "Oh, don't you want to dial in the espresso?" And I'm like, "No, I just want to talk to people." And so I think that interaction is like something that in our industry that we can all sort of understand. And we make one of the things I always say is, like, going for a coffee is the modern day smoking break. So in an office now, it's not as acceptable to say, like, we're going to go out for a smoke for 10 minutes. Some people might be annoyed by that. But if you said, I'm going to go for a flat white, do you want one? They're like, yeah, I'll come with you. And so you get that break from the office, you get to hang out, you see the baristas, you have a joke, and then you go back, and then you're slightly happier than you were before. And yeah, it's interesting. But I love that hospitality, and I think that won't change, and I don't think that has changed. I think, okay, the tools have changed, or like there's development in coffee processes might have changed a bit, but ultimately at its core, it's much the same.
Let's talk about hospitality a little bit, man. Let's dive in on that, because Dave and I, we're also big believers in hospitality at our cafes back home. We hire people with no coffee history. We hire people with personalities and outgoing, hospitable sort of energy, because that's what we believe fits into a cafe as well. So I'm curious to know, how do you build a team that has this similar sort of value and vision with hospitality? And then let's start with that, and then I've got a follow-up question.
Hospitality is really tough, just because it's about what you serve, it's about how you serve it and where you serve it, right? It's quite simple in those like pillars, but quite hard to execute. And it's all about the proportion of tables to people serving. It's about how you get in and out, what materials you use for the tables and the walls and the chairs, and because it all contributes to a hospitable experience. And so, like, the thing for me important when I was building the shop was, at the very core, like before we even build the team, at the very core, if we are going to serve a high-end coffee, we need a high-end coffee experience. So that includes the table you sit at, the cup that you use, the carafe. Is this the if we're saying, these are some of the best coffees that we can find? Is this the best carafe we can find? Is this the best cup we can find? But like, okay, with like a business mind on a two, right? Like it's not the most expensive in the world, but is it durable? Is it et cetera, et cetera? Can we use this forever? Like, is this a thing that's going to last? Can we mop every day and the floor's not going to get ruined? Like all of these things, that is the starting point. Then comes the team. And my personal belief there is, obviously I spent, I think, 8 years as a barista and made over 500,000 cups of coffee. And from there, like one of the things I really want to do in this business is show that being a barista is a skill. Like it's hard to make hundreds of cups of coffee a day, chat to people, and do all the tasks well, whilst also delivering at high standards. And therefore, I believe that should be rewarded. And I don't know what it's like in other countries, and I have a brief view, but in the UK we have minimum wage, which is the legal minimum you're meant to pay a member of staff. We have London Living Wage, which is a different foundation or organization, should I say, that is setting the wage that you need to live in London, which I think at the moment is something like 20 or 30% above living wage. Minimum wage. Then there's living wage, which is higher, which is the actual like cost of living. And then we try and pay above that. And so by doing that, one, we're able to attract staff. But more importantly, we're able to reward our team for doing a great job and upholding the standards. And ultimately, by displaying a high degree of, as high as possible degree of hospitality, we're then able to reflect that in pay. And I think that's significant because we want to show baristas there is a career in coffee, and one way you can do that is financially, right? And one of my guesses throughout the years is a lot of people leave the industry because there's just a better paying job somewhere else, and that's a struggle, because how do we retain knowledge? How do we retain skills and build people's careers? Because ultimately, at some point people want to go on holiday, pay for things, and like it's just a reality. We can't do it out of passion forever. Money is a hard thing to talk about, but is equally very important for why we go to work as well.
Yeah, super important. Super important. I think that's a brilliant way to build up the team and make sure that they're incentivized to come into work, bright and bubbly every day. How do you what sort of other tactics or tips do you maybe want to put out there to people in order to build a team of people that is as passionate about hospitality as you are? Clearly high up on the ranking list for you is one of the top things you said about the brand. How do you surround yourself with that type of people? Do they just show up at your door one day looking for a job because you're that passionate about it? They're drawn to you, or how do you sort of surround yourself there?
Yeah, so I kind of got on a sidetrack there with about how we pay, but equally there's contributing factors and pay is one of those, and I said an equal part of these. Two is the thing that we serve, and by delivering coffee that is a whole spectrum of coffees, and some of the lots we buy are 2 or 3 kilos, and that's all that's produced in the world, all the way down to our house coffee. We have 16 coffees on at any given time, and some from the big names, some from emerging, producers, and some
You
from
said
very
16?
16, 1 6.
16, okay.
Yeah, and so baristas are attracted to the menu. They want to try these coffees, and they want to brew them, and they love them as much as I do. And then the third thing was in the building, which is where I think I got lost on the tangent. In the building of it, I believed that I had 2 customers: the person that comes in and buys a flat white, but also the barista, right? And so one common problem I think we find is like workflow is often talked about efficiency and how we produce X amount of cups. But actually workflow is about leaving the baristas less exhausted as well. So like it has an effect on the other side of the counter as well, because if you're turning 1,000 times a day, then yeah, your back hurts, or the bar's too high, your shoulder hurts. And so if we can alleviate that where we can, and being a barista is a physical job, you're on your feet all day and you're always moving. So if we can alleviate any of those stress points, then that's what I try and do too. So it's a mixture of building a bar that works, building a menu that works, and then paying appropriately. And those three contributing factors mean that the day-to-day is as good as it can be. Okay, there's still stresses and toughness in there. And, in any business, nothing's perfect. But then on top of that, very fortunately, like throughout the years of being in the industry, there was a certain level of, network that we drew upon as well. So it's a combination of factors of how we found people. Interestingly as well, through the UK, we've gone through Brexit over the last sort of few years, and which meant it's actually really it's harder to find staff in hospitality, which were traditionally, a bit easier to find, but that's changed now, thanks to our government policies.
Paul, you were talking about the customer base, and you said there's kind of two customers coming in. You got the everyday latte drinker, let's say, or flat white drinker, and then you have the barista. What does that split look like?
Oh, sorry. When I meant I have two customers personally, not as in the shop has two customers, as in like I see that I have like the customers that come in and buy the coffee, and then my customers are the baristas who work there, because they have to come in as well. Okay. But interestingly, the customer split is interesting because we get locals, we get like destinational coffee people that want to come and try the coffee, but then also just people in the industry that want to hang out and try something different. So it is actually a very interesting split. I actually don't know the numbers, but it is, just don't know who's going to walk through the door at any given time.
And if someone's listening and they're hearing 16 different coffees, how's the logistics work on dialing, grinder, recipes, brews? Walk us through that whole kind of game.
It's tough, as you know. We have 3 espressos. We have a house espresso, a feature espresso, and a decaf. So that's 3. There are fresh in hopper, standard cafe operation. Then we have a house filter, which is also, rotating as and when. That is the cheapest filter on our menu. And then we have 12 specials. So these are all frozen doses. That is an under-counter freezer, and it's, a lot. Because we have like frozen doses. We have 2 EG1s and 2 brew bars. So the EG1s are set up for filter at the moment. One will eventually become espresso, so we'll extend the menu even further. But let's walk before we run. And essentially, we have a system whereby a coffee's ordered, a ticket's printed, the actual ticket, like that typically would say, the coffee name, also has the recipe. And, that I first saw that at a place called Roslyn in London, a great place if anyone's in town. And we've expanded on that slightly based on the coffees. And so even if you were coming into it for the first time, no barista is going to come in and brew the coffees for the first time. But if you were to come into the first time, you would have a rough idea of what the numbers were meant to be. Grind size, dose, temperature, and total brew time. And if at any point none of those don't line up, then we rebrew. But with the frozen grind and the choice of freezer, grinder, dose, and brew methods, we seem to be doing okay.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah, I love that too. Run me through. I get a ticket printed, and it says washed Ethiopian, whatever. Insert name here, and then underneath that, it's giving me, rather than table number or rather than this order is for Paul, it's giving me the recipe of the.
Sorry, no. So, Cole, you walk into the shop, and I say, "Hello, Cole. How's it going? I know you love."
Yeah, hi Paul. Nice to see you.
I love you. I know you. I know you've just been to the best of Panama. Let me make you a coffee. And you say, "Okay, I'll have number 12 on the menu." And I'm like, "Fantastic."
Yeah.
At the moment, it's from Esmeralda. I'm like, "Fantastic, great choice. Take a seat. Would you like still or sparkling water?" And you say, still water. Okay, no problem. We bring over still water, and then the barista gets the ticket. So the barista gets Cole, or like table number 8, Hacienda La Esmeralda Natural Noria 4NB. And then they say, it's number 12. So we go into the freezer, look at number 12, get the dose. The grind size is 8.5 on the, it's not, it's like 9.5 on EG1. They grind it, brew it as the ticket says. But as I said, typically they've brewed it before, so they kind of know. And then they bring it over to you and say, "What a fantastic choice! You have everything you need."
And then you realize that you got my pick.
See, look
at that,
Cole. I know you too well. I know you too well.
That's cool, man. That's a clever system. That's a very clever system. I like that.
We have this sort of omakase style bar. So when the barista gets the ticket, you're sitting in front of the barista. They can chat to you. "Oh, have you ever been to Esmeralda? Have you tried XYZ?" Or like, "Oh, how are you brewing? Like, why are you brewing with the EG1 origami, Abaca papers, and all these kind of things?" And you can chat whilst that 4-minute brew is happening. And then they say, "Yeah, enjoy. You've chosen a fantastic coffee." And then equally, they can go wash up and still chat to you, or brew another coffee, and you can ask them another question. Or like generally, which is kind of funny, the person next to you goes, "Oh, I was thinking about ordering that coffee," and then they're chatting to you about that, and then all these kind of things. So the style is quite open. So the bar is quite open, and it goes back to that barista skill. Like I wanted it to be both physically and metaphorically in the middle of the room, coffee. And baristas and the bar is quite wide in terms of barista gap. And it's so everyone can see everything. And, all the details that you don't necessarily see normally, you can see and be like, "Oh, that makes sense. Oh, like that, it's quite impressive that they do X, Y, Z. And like, why do you use that piece of equipment or that piece of equipment?" And it generates conversation and also just allows baristas to execute at a high level.
Yeah, amazing. We're gonna have to find a photo of the cafe and just lay it in on the video here. And I don't know how to do that, but we'll get that figured out for the podcast so people can see the way it's built up. It sounds amazing, man. I'm curious. Navigating 16 coffees on the menu. What have been a couple of the challenges that you've had to face in order to execute on that? And then maybe a couple of I think you just hit on a couple of the success stories with people, commenting on, "Oh, I was going to order that," or "That one's interesting." Maybe you've got a story or two that you can say on either side of the spectrum that's been positive and negative toward having such a wide depth of menu available.
I think there's some obvious negatives to it, just because you have to have such a breadth and depth of knowledge to do that. Like if someone asks for number 11, you're like, "Okay, I need to know about what the CCD do to the coffee, right? Like, and right. What is nitro flushing, and all these things. Like there are some quite niche knowledge bits. But the hardest thing always, and this is true of all coffees, so it's not even true of this menu, well, it is true of this menu, but true of all coffees, is delivering on people's expectations. And that's the hardest thing, especially when price is involved. And so as well as I do, like the green prices are at the higher end, getting higher and higher every year, and therefore the cup per cup prices in cafes are also increasing at the higher end, and it's true at the lower end now as well. But and the challenge there is people see these coffees, and you're like, why is one twice or three times the price of the other? And actually, our lowest cost filter and our highest cost filter is 10 times the price now. And and so like the challenge there is being like, well, we need to deliver on people's expectations and make sure that everyone leaves happy. And actually, that's not a coffee problem. That's just a general hospitality problem. But the coffee side of it is like, that is a challenge perspective, being like, well, let's talk through these 12 coffees. Then it takes a lot of time. And then how do you move that queue? How do you rotate the tables in order to make the model work? That's always the challenge. But I think these are general hospitality challenges than it is the menu. Okay. It comes with more logistical problems, more time dosing, more time planning menus. But equally, I think the risk is worth the reward. And, we go in and have fantastic coffee. That's the pros of it, is you do have coffees that, you don't see everywhere. And, even yesterday we had someone who was overnight in London and came from the airport, went to a couple of cafes and then went back to the airport, and we were one of the cafes. And that's always my goal, of being like, if someone lands at Heathrow and has 24 hours, like I want them to come for a coffee, because that half an hour is very important to them and becomes very important to us as well, that they have a good time. And, these are, some of the world's, rarest, unique, whatever word you want to use, is coffees, and they're super interesting, and definitely like what I would find myself going to another city and trying to find. And you guys travel, and when you go to the city, you ask your barista friends or coffee people in that, like, where's the top 2 cafes I got to go to, or whatever it may be. And our goal is to be in that conversation.
They're going to start telling us to fly to London to meet you.
They have already. We do need to come. How do you layer in the C market? It's, near all-time highs, and then the cost, like you were saying, from the cheapest coffee on the pour over to that, the highest end is 10 times the amount. How do we translate that value to customers?
To be honest, I don't really want to comment too much on the C market. That's not my area of expertise. There's much more proficient people than me to go through that. I do think it's interesting that essentially coffee prices are rising. And it's a struggle, right? Because the world is going through this macro change constantly. But in that world of coffee, like, we deal with coffees that just are, cost wise are just not linked in that same way to a market. And so largely how we translate that value to customers, by definition, I think a lot of our customers are well versed in coffee anyway, because if you're buying a higher end coffee, you generally know why. And the people that are new to it, that's why we have a whole spectrum of prices and origins, and I say origins, we have a few origins, but processes, and trying to find the coffee that you like is more important than buying the most expensive. And that's, meet people where they're at rather than where we want people to be. Like, that's just not good for anyone. And, I'd rather you have the cheapest coffee on our menu and have a great time than go for something more expensive and not enjoy it. So, often our baristas say, like, we have a spectrum of 1 being the house coffee all the way up to 12. Our baristas will often say, I like number 8. Like, or something like that. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Like, recommend whatever you like. I'm not here to dictate what I like. I like them all. That's why, I source them. But that, yeah, it's just different. And I think as soon as a customer gets on that journey and, tries one, tries two, tries three, and then it's like, okay, I'll try, it's my birthday this week, I'll have, one of the higher end ones or something.
Could
And
we
then
rewind?
Sorry?
Sorry. No, you go ahead.
No, I was just saying it happens. Like people come back and they're like, okay, the menu's about to change because it changes every 6 weeks. You're like, it's about to change. I'll try that one before it goes.
So could we rewind how, you started your company 2.5 years ago? Where did this idea come from? Why, go through the pain of opening your own store? What was the entrepreneurial journey like? Can we start through that like thought process and the pain points and the...
Of course. I was always passionate about competitions and things like this, and pushing myself. Competition's not for everyone, and that's okay too. But it did give, one of the perks of it was it gave you access to these coffees, right? And then these coffees that weren't everywhere. People would save coffees for competitions all year round, and it'd only be there. Then you'd do swaps backstage with other baristas and other, coffee people, and you'd meet producers, and I loved it. I thought, these are great. The coffees were great, and you learn about different countries and different styles and different ways of drinking coffee. And by doing that, I thought it was a shame that it wouldn't come to London. And lots of my friends in the industry and baristas I worked with didn't have that opportunity, and I very much felt like it was a privilege of being the UK barista champion to bring that coffee back and share it. And so after lockdown, one of the things that I wanted to do was I brought all these coffees together from the competitions and where people sent me and things like that, and dosed them out individually. And I set up this event where we gave it all away, essentially. I think it was something like I can't remember, it was hundreds of cups of coffee, from, competition winners, WBC winners, Brewers Cup winners, from rare releases, Eugenioides, like everything. And we just gave it away. And that was sort of something I wanted to do, to give back to the people that have helped me so much in my life, and also pay it forward to other baristas who maybe aspire one day to have these coffees. And so that was something I was always passionate about and I wanted to do, and the event was fantastic and I had lots of help. So shout out to everyone who helped out with that. And then from there, I was like really passionate about these high-end coffees, and we slowly saw them trickle in. I would say like 1 or 2 coffees a year would come out, special releases and things like that. And then eventually it got to a point in my career where I was like, in these bigger businesses that like wanted to go that way as well. It was just becoming very slow. And me being me was like, I want this to go quicker. And so then it kind of came to a point where I was like, okay, I've got to do this myself. And by doing that, I then was like, how do we go about doing that? I set up a subscription, which was for the first couple of months that we did. And then I went into wholesale and retail online, grew the menu, kind of buy a coffee, sell a coffee, buy a coffee, sell a coffee. And then eventually it came to a point where I always knew that I wanted a bricks and mortar site, because that way you can showcase what you do. Without that, you're relying on others to brew and serve your coffee. And, we're very fortunate to work with some great people, but ultimately it's never your full menu or, something's out of stock or something. And so I went about looking for a site, and from the first day of viewing the site to opening was 21 months. Isn't that crazy? And so, yeah, we went and did it. And, that was 2.5 years ago now, where we started, and then just kept on, sticking to the things that I felt were important in terms of, quality of coffee, and working with competitors and shops around the world and all these kind of things. and just stuck to that. And so far, this is where it's got us.
Paul, I think you're breaking down new barriers, man. I think you're on a new frontier that a lot of people are not exploring. And I think the biggest thing that I just heard you say is taking the competition coffees out of the competition and trying to make them accessible to the people. I I would love to know where your passion for that stems from and why you think that's important for the market growth. I have an opinion as well that I can share maybe after you cover that, but I love a lot of what you just said there.
Yeah, I mean, like, as I said, like, competition is often debated about the pros and cons of competition. And I think one of the pros is, as I said, having access to these coffees. One of the cons is also you are the only people to have access to those coffees. So it's a double-edged sword, right? And I don't want it to be that way. I don't want it to be the way that you have to be in competition to do this thing. Like competition is has been great for my career personally, but is also like not the be all and end all. And I think that's very important to notice. There's some great baristas that I've worked with that have not competed. And so, I think it's important that these coffees do reach those baristas that are passionate, that are in the industry, that want to grow a career, that want to explore new coffees and things like that. I think it's important that we share those. And also, I think from a consumer's point of view, we are finding that consumers are becoming more educated, much like the world of whiskey and wine and things like that. Although I hate the comparison into alcohol, because alcohol is a finished product and coffee is not.
Right.
But, I think that there is this level of interest there. In the UK, we have a big pub culture, for example, and we're seeing that decline. Because there's less people drinking, essentially, 0% alcohols and things like that, or 0% beers and alcohol is becoming more popular. And I just think there's this like crescendo in coffee that's coming. Like it's coming that maybe that's a bad way of phrasing it, but in coffee, I feel like there's this wave coming that is more intrigued. And actually, I just think there's lots of great people doing, especially in big cities, and obviously London's one of those. In big cities, there's great people doing like chocolatey flat whites, or there's great people doing those. And so I'd almost say like we can do those, but ultimately we want to do something different because, as I said, there's loads of people doing great stuff already, and I want to be both a positive addition to our industry and also to our neighborhood too.
That's why I'm saying you're a pioneer and you're pushing a new frontier of coffee that really not a lot of people have had the courage historically to try to promote. I think the funny thing about the competition space is, we all show up in the backstage and we're all geeking out and hyped up about our coffee that we're serving, and then nobody else ever gets to try that. And it's like, what are we competing for if nobody else has access to the product that we're using here to participate? Who are we doing this for other than, a small group of producers that seem to trend in and out of the competition space, and then ourselves? And if that's what we're doing it for, what's the point in doing it? But if we're doing it for a way to create a new category or push or promote the high end, boutique side of the market to be more accessible, and have guys like Paul Ross promoting it in his business in a retail shop, in a brick and mortar, and saying, oh, on the 16 coffees here, we used number 7 in this Brewers Cup championship. We used number 10 to win the World Coffee and Good Spirits Championship, which we're going to talk about at some point in this episode. We, used these different coffees for different points in the history of coffee competition, and let's celebrate those things here in the shop where you can actually try them. Where otherwise, it's really hard to connect with what we're doing on these competition stages if the access points just don't exist. You mentioned you got access to these coffees. by getting to the world championship as a competitor. But prior to that, had a difficult time accessing these coffees. So even an industry, you've been in the industry at that point for 5 years or 8 years, and hard to get your hands on these coffees, but they exist, but we just gatekeep them from the greater good of the industry. And you're a model that's proving that you can sell these coffees, you can build a business utilizing these coffees in day-to-day operation. And I applaud you for that.
No, that's super nice of you to say. I think that I'm also keen to reiterate, though, that like my part in this is very small in the wider scheme of coffee, but I do hope that it shows some glimmer that there is a market for these coffees, and however small our dent is in the industry, then hopefully it's a positive one, and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's putting wind in the sails. Other people are seeing what you're doing, and they're seeing that, oh, if Paul's doing it, maybe I can too. Oh, if Dave's doing it, maybe I can too. Oh, if, so and so and so on and so forth. It's lead by example, and others will follow in that pursuit. So I think it's pretty amazing what you're doing at Special Guest and trying to make these coffees and the barriers to access them, easier to get to. It's a big step, I think, for the small industry that is specialty coffee, and a small step for the greater industry that is coffee as a whole, because I think other people will see that too. We got lots of chocolatey flat whites, but let's try to put some of these other coffees into coffee shops and make them accessible to other people so they know it exists, just simply so they know it exists.
No. No, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate the work that you're doing. We're trying to, figure out ways to make that more accessible from our platforms as well. And slow and steady wins the race type of thing. What is a challenge you've maybe seen, before you open the brick and mortar? Talk to us a little bit about the wholesale business. And I think you caught some success, what seemed from an outsider looking in, on the international market quite rapidly, and maybe that's story more so than it is fact. Could you tell us a little bit about how you positioned yourself in the early days as Special Guest, and some of the international growth that you found?
I do find this topic quite interesting, because we all live in our own echo chambers, right? And so when you see it in the international market, it's probably the type of coffee shops or the businesses that you interact with. Whereas in the general scheme of things, the business was relatively small. But the route I took was kind of like double down on what success I've already had in the industry and in competition. And there was some global exposure based on the WBC. And I think, the previous year I placed 10th in the world in WBC, and which is my highest ever placing. And so that has a global audience anyway. And so there is an element of that you sort of work with. Secondly, I think London as a place has a brand in itself, and so working with a coffee business that's out of London is also helpful. It's a contributing factor, and then thirdly, I work with competitors as well. So you sort of touched on Coffee Good Spirits there. That's probably the niche I found most success in, and I work with competitors all over the world for that competition. And so all of those contributing factors meant that I was able to build a foundation. And then within the UK, the network of contacts through coffee shops and baristas and everyone else, just people in the industry, were able to do wholesale and retail and slowly grow the business bag by bag.
Can we shift to coffee and good spirits? Can you tell our listeners what it is? You've competed in it before, and now you find great success as a coach. Tell us
Yeah,
about
a great success. A funny term. I competed in 2017 and won the UK Championships. And I distinctly remember it was one of the hottest summers. It was like 40 degrees in the shop at any time in London. And typically in London, there's not much air conditioning. And so, because it doesn't get to 40 degrees usually. And we trained so hard for it and for Budapest. And to be honest, it was both the greatest thing. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, someone might be angry, but I think I placed 9th in the world. It was a fantastic opportunity. Like I put so much into it and time and effort, and maybe a bit too much, to be honest. Both in terms of sort of potential burnout and also like expectation as well. And that was a big learning. And Dan Fellows would come with me as my coach to Budapest then, who has an amazing career of his own, and I learned a lot off when I was at Origin at the business. And then the year after that, Dan became the champion, and I worked with him on his championships. We spent a lot of time together. He put in far more time than I did, obviously as the competitor. And my belief as a coach, you might have heard me say that I only had, at best, I had 5%. Like the competitor is 95%, and then I just do some tweaks and stand in the crowd and shout. But so he would then go on to win. We would go to Brazil. That's a whole new story as well. But we had we got 2 separate flights. So he got a flight and I got a flight. Long story
like
short,
the king and queen, right? Can't be on the same flight.
Yeah, long story short is he got left with like 90 kilos of luggage, and I got delayed. I got rerouted through like a different airport, and so yeah, that wasn't ideal. But anyway, that was the first year, and then Dan would go on to become champion in Brazil, and that was phenomenal experience for myself, just being backstage and learning a lot and chipping in where I could, and just it's phenomenal. I mean, it's you know what, like it's giving me goosebumps now. It's weird. It's like I can't even explain it. When you work so hard for something and then it comes true, and it's you're in the middle of Belo Horizonte and you have no idea how life has got you there, but there we were. And then the year after that, I actually left the job. I was just a part-time barista. I left the job, and Dan was actually the UK champion again before he won the Brazil one. Anyway, bit of a complicated timing situation. People wouldn't normally re-enter if they win the Worlds, but he was already in. He already had a ticket. And I joined much later on in the process of that, and he had someone else helping him as well. But I was able to go out to Berlin and be backstage, there as well. And I mean, for anyone who follows Coffee and Good Spirits, he won again, and another phenomenal experience. But as I said, much less input from my side that time. And then I had a bit of a break year. I didn't compete in Coffee and Good Spirits again since 2017, but I had a break, and then I joined one of my friends out in Milan, very, very last minute, just to help him through it. And then last year, the year after that was 2021, 22, and Rusty, who is a a great bartender and barista and a friend of mine for a number of years. I think 5 years we've been working together on Coffee and Good Spirits in the UK. And I first met him when, I think it was in Brazil, when he was the Slovakian champion, I believe. Anyway, fast forward 4 years, he became the UK Coffee and Good Spirits champion. And we worked together a lot. And he asked me to coach him for the championships. Long story short is we then went out to Copenhagen. No, it wasn't Copenhagen. Where was it? Oh my God.
It was in Taipei.
Taipei, exactly. Yeah. Yes. How could I forget? In Taipei, he was like, this is, he spent a long time training, years, and we worked together, and he asked me to coach him for that. So we started off from the beginning all the way up, built this great story, and his very supportive wife was also coaching him as well. She was phenomenal. And in Taipei, he took down the title as well. So at that point, it was a couple of years break for me, and then that happened, and it was incredible. And I must admit, he's a phenomenal bartender. He's worked some of the best bars in the world. And then he won the Coffee Masters at the UK, London Coffee Good Spirit, London Coffee Festival. And so he's a phenomenal barista. So to be honest, my job there was more just, bringing it together for the structure and things like that. But he was fantastic. And then last year, in Taipei, I met the Swiss champion at the time.
Copenhagen. Oh, you met him in Taipei?
No, sorry. In Taipei, I met the Swiss champion, Sandro, and his wife, and they were saying, basically, this is crazy. Like, this whole coffee thing, they're industrial designers by trade. He said in lockdown, he got into coffee and he got into cocktails. So he decided to enter the coffee and cocktails competition. He actually won the Swiss championships in the first year, and then flew out to Taipei. And he was like, "This is next level. Like, what are you guys doing?" And then he said to me, "I've actually won the championship for the second time in Switzerland. Will you coach me?" And so that was from the very beginning. We broke it all down again and tapped into what he was great at. He built a whole brand. It was phenomenal. Like, his bar set up, his menu, everything was designed by him. And I went to visit him, and then 2 weeks later, he's like, "It's ready." I was like, he built like a tiled bar. Like, he built loads of stuff. It was crazy. And then he placed second at the world. So he went from something like fifth last to second in the world from the year before. So, yeah, it's been a journey. It's been a journey, and this year I actually coached in Indonesia remotely as well. And Shayla just placed third at her nationals. Phenomenal job. Super busy. And so I found this kind of niche in coffee and good spirits through those things. And as I said, I love competition. I think it has a very specific place in the industry. And coffee and good spirits is a niche within a niche again. But equally, I still think it has the same characteristics and the same knowledge base. And it's a nice thing.
How do we make an amazing Irish coffee? Walk us through. Like, that's one of our favorite drinks, and it shouldn't be, but it's something, the cold cap, the hot coffee, it's so delicious.
Do you know what the secret here? You're asking me a secret sauce, Dave. No,
you don't have to reveal the secret sauce, but
no, the secret is the coffee and good spirits. Coffee is largely brewed quite badly by normal standards. But together with all the ingredients and everything else, it works. So it's about going back to the fundamentals of balance, sweetness, acidities, like all of those fundamentals that we have in coffee and in cocktails, and just making sure that the same fundamentals are in that glass. And also, don't undershake, but don't overshake the cream.
Yes.
So it's a fine line. It's two fine lines, actually, but yeah. 2 fine lines. It's tough. But when you get it right, it's very good.
They're so delicious. Yeah. When you approach as a coach, are you looking at the full perspective of the competitor's routine from drink build to workflow to hospitality, I suppose, in your world, and the full construction, or does it depend competitor to competitor how you kind of come on to support?
The way I approach coaching is like, what makes you special? Like that's my first question. Is like, why you? Why should it be you? Like, what's your USP essentially? Is what I'm asking, right? And the easiest one that I remember the most is like Rusty, right? Rusty told me this story about how he stood at the airport in Slovakia that he wanted to come and work at the world's best bars in London, and all he had was his ticket and like a dream of doing it, and he's then been able to like build this fantastic career while still being a phenomenal person. And so I was like, well, that's it then.
Yeah, that's winning on its own accord, right? Is getting the message or the delivery out there that you want to present on the stage is winning in a sense.
Yeah, and well, it's not even about winning. It's about like just delivering what you wanted to deliver. And if we've done that, that's all we can do. It's setting a reasonable expectation, right? Like the reasonable expectation, we want to do the best we can. And if we're not the best on the day, then we've done everything we could to do that. If we made a strategy choice or something like that, that was always going to be that way. So
yeah,
we can't change that.
Right. So I've never participated as a competitor in Coffee and Good Spirits. I've supported a little through team members back home. I'm curious your thought. Do you start with coffee? Do you start with the spirit, or do you start with the final theory of what the drink will be? What's the roadmap to building a great beverage?
You've hit the nail on the head at the hardest part. It's like, yeah, it's very difficult. You have to have some inspiration somewhere, and sometimes it's a coffee, sometimes it's a spirit. There's without going into the details of coffee and spirits, there's like sponsored spirits. So there's especially at the World, different places have different access to different ingredients. So do we build a drink based on the ingredients we can get in the place, or where we can get at home and bring them? All these kind of bits and pieces. It's very individual. And that's where I hope that competitors bring some ideas, because yeah, it's tough. It's tough. In all competitions that I've always approached, and it's one of the first things that I got told as a competitor, is this red thread, right? The red thread has to run throughout the whole routine from start to finish. So the thing you're saying at the start and the thing you're saying at the end, and everything that has to be connected by this red thread, whether it's fermentation or spirits or whatever it is, like these various topics or trends, it has to be clear. And ultimately, that's where we go with that.
It's your thesis or your essay that you're writing, right? You got your intro paragraph, your outro paragraph, and then the sort of meat in the middle.
Exactly.
There you go. There you go, people. That's how you build Coffee and Good Spirits routine, right there.
Easy, right? The hard thing is, I would say, like, if anyone's listening to this and wants inspiration based on Coffee and Good Spirits, it's very different if you've competed in a different category in coffee competitions. So like it takes a different mindset. There's similarities, of course, and they're side by side to BC and Brewers Cup and things like that. But the actual execution and topics and everything else is very different. Very different.
It's also very hard to train. We found the practice for Dave and I supporting team members back home. It's very hard to train. You have to drink these beverages, so you're limited to only so many times per day that you can do this. Otherwise you're leaving the office or wherever you're training and you're just delusional, right?
Yeah.
And it becomes hard to sort of navigate. I don't know if you've got a secret for that, or your tolerance.
Whatever, man. You loved it.
You
loved the 8 to 12 drinks you were having every day. You were enjoying it.
I made sure we started with a practice session the second I got to the office.
That's right.
Well, the trouble is like there's a few things on that, right? So like in Copenhagen, our practice time was 7 a.m. and we're having a tequila Bloody Mary at 7 a.m. I was like, this is not what I want in my life. It was tough going. But the reality is and I don't know how you do BC, but often the drinks that you make for coffee and spirits are very expensive because of the spirits, right? The spirits are both expensive and limited because you can't just have an unlimited amount of whiskey, for example. Right. So often when you do the run throughs, you're not making the drink. So, or you make a drink in a way that wouldn't be the end result. Yep. So essentially what you're doing is limiting what you try by doing that anyway. Right. Because you don't have spirits in every single one. Because like you said, you can't, it doesn't make sense. That being said, you obviously, I don't drink all of it always, especially unless it's the
that's
final
our problem.
One. Yeah.
We were finishing them all. We didn't know what was going on.
A second sip, please, judges. No, none left.
There's $25 in this drink. Finish it.
Yeah, but you just can't. I don't even sip all of them. I just can't. But ultimately, there's also some telltale signs that you don't necessarily get with coffee. So like if two cocktails are different colors slightly, then the ingredient balance is incorrect, or kind of like signature drinks, right? And what else? Yeah, that's pretty much it. You just have to be careful, basically. It's tough though. It's tough.
It's a fun arena. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's also weird because it's like this. If you train all the drinks, you can potentially have 6 different alcoholic drinks, right? In a set, and you're then having like a sip of tequila with, brewed coffee, some syrup, some spice. Then you move on to like a fruity, like Mai Tai coffee thing, and then you go on to an Irish coffee, and then you're like, I've got so many ingredients in my body. It's beyond fun. It's just like these are like coagulating or something like that. It's not nice. But first world problems.
Yeah. Paul, is there anything else you want to cover? We're kind of bumping up to the end of the podcast here.
Not particularly. I'm interested in how you think what I said about coaching translates into your experience of coaching.
Yeah, I'd agree with what you're saying. I think you've coached more world champions than we have, so you tell us how to do it. No, I think what you're saying is like we're help create a clearer voice and put some restrictions around what's being said, the clear line through everything, helping, with the drink construction, the pace of the presentation, all that is when a barista kind of takes that off their shoulders and has other people helping with them, that's when you can really elevate the presentation. And for us, it's like, we're just trying to elevate, not tell anyone what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have to add anything to that. I think Dave nailed it on the head. Pretty solid. Good job, Dave. Good job.
Well,
thanks, big guy.
It's worked out this far for you guys, so it's obviously something special is happening as well. Some secret sauce.
It's it's a fascinating role. Dave and I were talking about this yesterday, to be coaches in such a niche domain of coffee competition. We had dinner with family friends yesterday, and we're trying to explain what our role is and why we're, on this conquest in different places around the world, and how we're supporting different people through their journey of coffee competition. And it is such a fascinating niche that we've all sort of stumbled into here in our own way. And I'm super excited to see the arena continue to grow and more people come to a role where they're saying, "Oh, I'm a coach in a coffee competition, coffee and good spirits, and barista and brewers, and in whatever that might be." And we're at such a super fascinating, in my opinion, a very fascinating spot where 5 years ago there might have been one or two people that identified as a coach for barista competition, let's say, that people would know around the world. And I think that's starting to change. And there's more and more people entering the space and sort of dedicating themselves or their time and energy into growing the sport. I think it's a sport, and I think we should start to look at it more like that. Have more people look at it as if it is a sport, because your strategies, our strategies, everybody's strategies are maybe similar rubric with slightly different fundamental, and it's we're in a very fascinating place, I think, in the coffee competition circuit, and I'm excited to see where it continues to go and how somebody like you continues to innovate.
No, I think you're right. I think it is. That's a good way of viewing it as well. And in terms of competition, and how do you balance life and travel?
You want to go first? Go first, big guy.
I was going to answer, is there a distinction between the two? No, it's a joke. It's
you're traveling with your brother, so your family, yeah.
Yeah, and for better or for worse, we get along incredibly well, but it's also challenging. We're away from the rest of our family. So it's an awesome opportunity every day to get to travel with Dave and get to do the work with him. I think the big challenge, the challenge for me, and this is your question, is something I've been thinking about quite a lot recently. Over the past couple of months, this year, I think I've spent 9 months, possibly more, away from home. And, traveling is cool. Everybody dreams of traveling more. I think the way that we travel is challenging because we don't actually get to do a lot of the sights and sounds and, the tourism destination sort of traveling a lot of the time. It's very narrow focused on the competitor or the company that's hired us on to do coaching or consulting or whatever it might be, or the festival that we're attending, whatever it might be. And the challenge, at least from my perspective, is I've got this sense that I'm everywhere and equally nowhere. And I'm in this constant state of movement, which leads me to, then question, what am I doing when simultaneously I'm doing the thing that I've always been dreaming about doing, but then I start sort of questioning my being in that. And I don't have a great answer to your question on how to balance life and travel. So maybe Dave has some insight on that.
Yeah, travel, this type of travel can be very, very rewarding, but also quite draining at the same time. We're coming to a place, we're here, 7-10 days, working with someone for 8 to 12 hours a day. You get to know that person very well. And as you kind of go through that, you can see very quick improvements on things. And for a lot of team members that we've worked with in the past, they get very excited. And that, as they get excited, we get more excited. That motivates us, seeing improvement. So that kind of has a flywheel effect up. I think we're trying to balance like the road life with flights, coming from, we're in Montreal and then landing here, it's a 12-hour difference or whatever. And it's like sleep becomes a problem. Eating properly becomes challenging. Being healthy, drinking at night or things like that. So we have a schedule. It's like, get up, go for a run, have a coffee, have a good breakfast, and really, like, in the last 6 to 12 months, also saying, like, it's okay to say no to things, because there's just as there's lots of opportunity, you can start to go down that we're in this amazing place. We got to go see everything. And it's like that that might not be the best use of our time when we're 2, 4, 6 weeks into this, on the road, and we're completely crashed out and got no energy left to give to a competitor or to each other or to do interviews, anything else. So,
yeah, of course. I think that's where I'm kind of at with the business now. It's like, especially over the last 6 months of building, it's like trying to find that balance again of, life and exercise and work, and ultimately, coffee is a weird industry to be in because it transcends those. Because you often go for a coffee and then to catch up with your friends, and then you go to work and have a coffee, and then you go for a run and have a coffee, and then you're like, actually, I'm just back back in the coffee shop again. But no, I hear you on those things. I asked because it's something I thought about a lot as well, just because, yeah, it's one of the benefits of having the cafe is having a home again, whereas previously, with coaching and things like that, it is strenuous in different ways that people don't necessarily see.
How do you balance, you lead with hospitality in your business, which hospitality does not come with zero energy. That's usually a high energy derivative. How do you balance the hospitality with your international presence, your coaching, your training, traveling, and then selling to people in different time zones?
Well, I think it's important to say, like, I haven't got all the answers. And probably we'd all agree none of us have all the answers.
We got you on the show because we thought you had all the answers, man.
Yeah, but like
that was in the bio.
Paul, all the answers. But the funny thing is, recently, actually, I got super sick. No, I'd say super sick, like nothing serious, but just like worn out, basically. Like my body was like, you need to rest. And it was because I was taking calls in Asia in the morning. I think it was actually not Asia in the morning. It was in Indonesia at night, and then like in Colombia in the morning or something like this, all the other way around. I can't remember. But like it was then like a 23-hour day, and the whole time I'd been doing bits in and out of work, and it was just like, okay, this is too much. And then I remember like why I actually got into running as well. When I was a barista, there was like, I love chatting. That's my thing. It's probably why I'm on here. But I love chatting, and that's why I was on the till chatting to people. You have the Steam one going. You have people shouting people's names, the music, like people coming in and out, the door goes, whatever. And I got into running because when I went home, I just wanted some like headspace, and I don't wear headphones. I just ran, and after 2 or 3 kilometers, I didn't feel like it helped. But after like 5 to 10 kilometers, that's where I had that like meditative flow state, as it were, of running. And I just felt a lot better and decompressed. And often like I come away with 1 or 2 things that I want to do before I go to bed, and then do them, and then feel fulfilled for the day, or like everything was like looked after. And so I guess that's my thing. It was running. It was like that whole like clearing your head and just getting out there on your own, or like with a friend, and just going. I think maybe last time I bumped into you was when we were running, actually. But yeah, like, so I think that helped me especially. But it also retrospectively now probably means like it was another thing that wasn't coffee. And in the last couple of years, I've been learning another language, and that hit my like thirst for more knowledge, but that wasn't work. And so like, I think that was important as well, is like diversify the things I'm doing, just because if you focus solely on work, it becomes too much. Then you add in travel on top of that, and travel is often not considered work, but actually when you spend 12 hours in a plane, you probably don't spend 12 hours at an office. But then I'm conflicted because it's a privilege to be able to do these things. So it's a tough one. I don't know. It's something
I think the mind as an entrepreneur too, it feels like you could always be working on or in the business all the time. And it's how do you shut that off? And I think for us at the very beginning, especially me, I couldn't. I thought every moment had to be around the business and improving it or getting it better or doing whatever I could to make 1% increments. And then I finally realized, like, no, I need to rest because I'm operating at 40% or 60%. And if I rest, I'll come back at 110%. And that was such a weird trying to get out of that construct.
Yeah, and I think it's also simple things like if I go away on holiday, I don't drink coffee. Just because I need to reset my palate, I need to reset my mind, and it just makes me think of work. It's like, I don't know, it's just that, or someone comes up to you and says, how's the coffee? And you're like, oh no, like, because they know you're in coffee, and then you're just back into work mode. And I think, so I just don't drink coffee. And it often shocks people. They're like, but what? And I'm like, yeah, it's my thing. Like, it's my thing. I don't drink coffee. Like, I feel healthier, my tolerance or whatever goes back down, and I just feel better, and it helps me. So I think it's also important, like, you find the thing that works for you, right? That might not be for everyone, or people enjoy coffee or, whatever. And that's, great. But yeah, that's they're little life hacks. Yeah. And I think, it comes with, I started coffee in my 20s, and now I'm older, and like, your life changes, right? And you have different priorities and things like that. Not to say that, I'm over the hill or anything like that, but yeah, it's just things you pick up along the way.
Yeah. Well, Paul, we appreciate you being on here, man. Where can people find you online? Can you do a quick plug for your personal social media for the brand, and maybe a quick plug on the website too? Let's see if we can send some people through to buy some coffee.
Yeah, so the brand is Special Guest Coffee. We have a shop in Marylebone in London, central London. And we have obviously Instagram, Special Guest Coffee, and online as specialguestcoffee.com, where you can purchase coffee all around the world. My personal Instagram is Paul_Ross_, where I post very infrequently about coffee things and coffee events. But to be honest, Special Guest is where I spend most of my time, and you can't go wrong by following there. Yeah. As I said, thank you very much for having me and all the things you do in the world of coffee. I know the viewers might not know from looking at you right now. You're in Abu Dhabi, and hustling away when you might not need to, but you definitely do. So appreciate it.
Thanks, Paul. We appreciate you having you on. And if anybody finds themselves all the way at the end of the episode here and you're in London, check out Special Guest Coffee. We know we will. One of these days that we're making a trip out there. Thanks, man. Thanks so much for your time.
Get it done.
Let's do it.
Awesome. See you later, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.